Well, it's a delight to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. As I said, I'm joining you from the UK, where it is 24 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. So I hope you enjoyed your breakfast. It sounded like it was lovely. Um, what I'm going to talk about today is reporting standards for Bayesian networks. Now, if you don't use Bayesian networks in your work, don't switch off immediately because this asks wider questions about how we report and why we report what we do. The reason why this is focused on Bayesian networks is because it came out of a piece of work where we were trying to compare and contrast the uses of Bayesian networks in decision kind of making situations. Um, my unit, the Applied Statistics and Risk Unit, works very much with business, government, and industry in the UK. And graphical models are very, very useful in that context because the people who are the problem owners don't necessarily have to understand the mathematics behind the models because so long as we explain carefully the syntax of the picture, then we can be on the same page. We can collaborate closely on solving whatever problem is to hand, and they can kind of leave the analysts to do the Bayesian network, the chain event graph, or whatever graphical model we're using. So just move this on. There we go. So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, why do we model? Why do we do it at all? And there are a variety of reasons why we might make a model for something. We might want to make it just to understand the system or the problem that we actually have at hand. It doesn't have to be a quantitative model. It doesn't have to be a formal model. And so this kind of model making can be very useful for shared understanding. We might want to make a model because we want to predict something. Our weather models predict whether it's going to rain or not tomorrow in the UK. That's a very pertinent question. Do I need my umbrella or not? We might want to solve another kind of a problem. So we may have a spending dilemma. Do we invest in this package of actions or this packet of actions or some other problem like that? Mathematical modelling specifically uses mathematical concepts and language, and that can include equations and variables and relationships. Now, as Box famously said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And the question we're asking today is, which ones are useful and what are they useful for? And how can we distinguish between the ones that are useful and the ones that are not useful? And so evaluation, the assessment of accuracy and relevance is really important here. So in order to assess the usefulness of a model of any kind, a minimum amount of information is required. Now, recently, there's been a lot of discussion about replicability, reproducibility, and repeatability. Sometimes these things are used interchangeably, and we use them in that format in our paper, which came out in Entropy in January. But some people use them differently. Reproducibility, say, for calculations, replication of whole experiments, and some idea that it produces similar or sufficiently similar results or the same results exactly. The open science movement promotes transparency and reproducibility in science by sharing of protocols and data and things like this in manuscripts, so that somebody can literally take your code, take your data, and get the same results as you, provided you provide enough information about that. And if it's a simulation, for example, that might be your seeds and things. So it's possible also to publish protocols for systematic reviews in something like BMC systematic reviews, or study protocols in BMC public health and that kind of thing. So this keeps the scientists honest. You put in your protocol before you start your experiment or your review or whatever it is, and then you come back and you can be held to account in that sense. And then there's the Equator Network, which has reporting guidelines, and this is very specifically in sort of medical research, but they're very important because they do allow you or ensure that people record the same information so these things can be replicable. And they do this by checklists. And the one for randomized trials, as you probably know, is called Consort. The one for observational studies is called Strobe. The one for systematic reviews is called Prisma, and so on. And a colleague at the University of Warwick did a PhD thesis on actually looking at reproducibility in behavioural sciences, which was very interesting to read. So increasingly, governments are taking on board the need to really interrogate mathematical models and really understand what they are doing, what are the assumptions underlying, and so on. And recently there was issued in the European Union a set of questions to be asked for modelling, including things like AI. Um, so the EC Competence Centre on Modelling produced some things, Data Science Guide for Society produces something, complex models can be hard to understand. But if you ask these basic questions as a user, you should have sufficient knowledge to know what you can use them for, where they're trustworthy and where they are limited. And we're all familiar, I'm sure, with the books pictured on the right here. Automating Inequality has a look at algorithms and how they are applied in matters of justice and support for people who are struggling, and how, because the data itself is biased, then actually the algorithms come out with the same biases that human beings have. And in her book, Invisible Women, Caroline Perez goes into detail about how much of the world has been designed on the presumption that a human being is a male human being, and everything from the seatbelt design to air conditioning standards suit men more than women. So what we need is key information to be provided to ascertain whether the modelling is fit for purpose. So the proportion of models and AI that are being used in government policy modelling is really growing, certainly over here in Europe. And Bayesian networks and other graphical models are powerful, as I said earlier, because they're able to present modelling in a graphical form. Doesn't require the policy partner to grasp complex mathematics. The semantics are sufficient. And speaking personally, these are some of the areas I've been working with. The National Archive is the archive of government in the UK. And in partnership with them, we built them a decision support system based on a Bayesian network, which allowed them to argue or make a business case for a significant uplift in funding to protect digital archives specifically. We're working with the local authority on reducing food poverty. They have a lot of possible interventions, but they have no idea currently of which packages or which combinations of those strategies are going to have the most effect. And that hopefully when we finish building this tool for them, they will have a much better idea of that. And again, possibly because they're a government organisation, be able to argue for uplift in funding. We've worked on the pollination problem. Without pollination, there's no food, of course. Including helping those in Australia because they have recently had an incursion of the varroa mite, which is foreign to them, and their production of honey has been always free from because they haven't had to have insecticides or miticides in the hives to protect the production. So their risks are quite different, and there isn't a country exactly like theirs for them to sort of copy. So it's all feeling their way. Other models of like kind, flood risk to infrastructure, so thinking about whether climate change is going to increase the number of floods that we have, and predictive policing for terrorism. So Bayesian networks are used by multiple disciplines. It's not just mathematicians and statisticians that use them, and their conventions within those disciplines vary from a lot of detail to completely using it as a black box. We have signature pedagogies, and this doesn't just apply to academics, but within our disciplines, within our cultures, within our business sectors, we have distinctive teaching and learning methods, and the way that you are thought of as what constitutes excellence and how you're expected to think and learn and so on is different. And that actually gives us a language problem, because very often you find that you use the same word for something different or different word for something that's the same. So spending some time with the problem owner, learning their languages and coming to a shared vocabulary is a really important part of genuine problem solving. And another reason why this is important is because published articles are the primary source of information and knowledge for the research community. So we thought that this was actually a sufficiently important problem to spend some time on. And then we want to think about, well, what is it we're interested in replicating? What we're interested in replicating in the case of a BN is the process and analysis that produced it. So we want some transparency and clarity for the reader. it needs to be reproducible. It needs to be used defensively by a decision maker. So if there's some kind of scrutiny committee or something comes back and said, why did you make this decision? Then you've said, well, this is the narrative of how this model was built. These are the experts that fed into the model. These are the data that we used, and these were the results we obtained. And if you want to do a systematic review, of course, you will need to have all these things reported. So the development process, the analysis, and key qualitative results are the things that we really thought were the things that ought to be reported consistently across the community. And we started off imagining these 8 features, whether it's a template or a bespoke BN. How did the variable choice come about? What is the state space or discretization method? Is the model well defined? How did the conceptual model come about? What about the edges in the Bayesian network? What about the parameters? And was there any validation or verification? So we actually reviewed 15 papers and asked these questions. And after that exercise, we saw that we were able to collate all the questions into 4 key sections. What is the model information? What is the structure? What are the parameters? And what evaluation was done? And so we sent this out to various experts, particularly the Bayesian Network Modeling Association, and 11 people replied. We asked them, how burdensome was it? How easy was it? And is the help text any good, or is it confusing? So in round 1 of the feedback we got, we offered free text feedback. So we added an opening explanatory statement of why this checklist was useful, why we were producing it. We revised the help text, and we expanded the conditional questions. If you answer yes to this, then you have a few more clarifying questions. So in the second round, we asked those experts to submit information on a Bayesian model from their own project, and then to consider these questions. What additional questions would be needed for reproducibility? Are the questions clear and easy to answer? Is the help text useful and complete? And is it a suitable ordering of questions? Because we know that sometimes if we order questions differently, we'll get different answers because of what's actually in the person's mind when they're moving on to the next question. They have, we are context dependent in that. So then we asked, what is the current state of reporting? So the finalized checklist, we used 15 papers, 5 from the development stage and 10 new, and we evaluated them and looked at the frequency of reporting of various aspects of it. So in general, some aspects were very well reported. The model purpose, the node dictionary, process and protocols used in the expert elicitation of the BN structure, those were generally well reported. However, some things were consistently poorly reported, with the priors, the data sources relevant to structure learning, and the number and details of the experts used in elicitations. Now, that can be a sensitive subject, we understand that, but if you can just have the number of experts and what their general areas of expertise were, that would actually be very useful, even if you can't have sort of names and contacts, as it were. So we found that the questionnaire was widely applicable in modelling work and takes about 20 minutes. So we, so it's widely applicable, a range of applications and so on. But to have stronger evidence, we need a broader use of the tool amongst BN developers. We expect to develop these as more information emerges, but we do believe that we've done enough valuation so far for it to be useful and worth releasing into the community. So engaging with the community in the development has helped us to align the language and our approach to convey the use and value of standardized reporting. And there are a number of different sectors we hope to support. First of all, early career researchers who are entering Bayesian network modeling as a field of study, or whose professional development can be supported by considering things like transparency and reproducibility in the formative areas stages of their career. Now, sometimes we have researchers whose primary expertise is in other fields, but who want to use the power of Bayesian network modeling, and we feel that the checklist is useful for them. If you've got an established researcher from another domain, providing them with this understanding, the checklist can provide them with an understanding of the essential ingredients for BN development. And those who are reviewing BN modelling, whether for a report or for a published paper or some kind of thing, for transparency and reproducibility, the checklist is a good place to start in saying, well, actually, have we included, or has the author included all the things we might require? It can act as a quick summary as whether a submission meets common community standards. And reviewers who are not themselves part of the BN community, but maybe part of the application community, can be supported in the quality of their critiques if they're responding to the questionnaire. We hope that the guidelines will help journals and advise authors of the appropriate level of detail for their BN modelling. And obviously, some journals have word limits and so on. So some things might go into the online only additional material, but that's fine too. And those who are commissioning research can ensure that relevant details are reported. There are parts of the BN community that don't cover. For example, extensions to BNs such as object-oriented BNs or template-based BNs, Bayesian hierarchical models. These are very useful, but we intentionally had to start somewhere. We began with the most tractable forms of the BN. And we expect that as we gain further real-world use of the current guidelines, they'll allow us to expand the guidelines to support structural causal models, dynamic BNs, the DAGs used for causal inference, and so on. So a key advantage of BNs is that they represent useful knowledge and that the knowledge they contain is reusable. One of the impediments has been a lack of standardized representational approaches. So better researching can help researchers identify relevant research and BN models much more effectively, and it may stimulate the sharing of knowledge resources. And there are several public repositories of BN models online, including the BNMA one, which is linked here. So I do hope you'll have a go at looking at that if you're working with BNs at all or reviewing other people's work with BNs. And let us know these things. There's a link in the questionnaire itself for you to feedback to us. What questions you think might be missing? Are the questions easy and clear to answer? How useful is the help text? Are there any techniques or concepts that should be described that are missing? Are there any issues? And are the sections appropriate, the way in which the questions are divided up? So please do have a look at that. Send us some feedback if you're using it. We'd be delighted to hear from you. Thank you very much.